Hey everyone, welcome back to another Friday with Fred. It's been a while. There always will be big gaps between Fridays with Fred, but wanted to recap a little bit of an event that I did last week where I went to Cleveland, Ohio to attend MAICON, all things about marketing and AI. So let's get into it. So last week I took a couple days off and I headed to Cleveland, Ohio to attend the fourth annual MAICON Marketing AI conference hosted by the Marketing AI Institute. I want to kind of talk about that event, what I learned, what I saw as a person who's deeply kind of invested in thinking about AI and how it's going to affect not only me as a marketing professional, but my kids' careers, my future of work. But I kind of give a quick backstory. I've been in this world of marketing and technology for decades. Started back in college where I attended university, and we were one of the first classes that have this idea of computers in your dorm rooms. We had the dorms of the future, and went through and got a marketing degree. When I was graduating, I was talking with one of my professors, and he was like, "What do you want to get into?" And I said, "I really want to get into email marketing." He's like, "Oh, direct marketing." I'm like, "Nope, I think this internet thing is kind of going to be a thing." And so I was thinking more about this application. My brain was already in the mindset of digital versus being more traditional marketing from an actual career perspective. I've been inside technology for a number of years. My family's been in the technology space. I had like one of the first portable computers. It's called an Osborne. It's like the size of a suitcase. I had like a first 2X ROM CD-ROM drive. I looked at code when I was 13 for the Rolling Stones website on a browser called Mosaic. I can date myself 15 different ways of the moon. But I've always had this desire to see where this evolutions have started to come. So I've seen the cell phone evolution. I've seen the internet come and go and come back again. And I do think we are at this inflection point for being in this new era for AI, which is not a new thing. You've heard this probably being said for the last year and a half, but we're in this new phase. So I really wanted to go to MAICON. I had a lot of FOMO from missing it last year, but I really wanted to kind of invest myself and go this year. So I did. So I want to talk through that event, kind of some things that I saw, some things I learned, some of the great sessions, what my thoughts are as far as where the future of marketing and AI is going to be, where I see some applications, and kind of where the other things that happened while we were there, because there was this great announcement from OpenAI, and I'll show you a little bit about what's going on inside the world of OpenAI with the new preview models in comparison to, I'll show you an example of something I've already run from a legacy chat GPT 4.0 to the new preview model as well. So to kick things off, let's talk about what was MAICON. Like I said, it is a conference that is based out of Cleveland, Ohio, and an awesome set of people. The Marketing AI Institute is a fantastic organization. I've taken already courses from them in the sense of doing a piloting. That's the wrong tab, but piloting a marketing AI kind of side of course of stuff, which has been really fantastic. Did a great job just kind of helping you understand how can you look at AI, apply it to your world, see what use cases you can build out. And that's one of the big themes we kind of heard from the conference, is really how you could take piloting and bringing AI to the world. But they're all about AI literacy. At the end of the day, that is their main focus. In fact, they had this podcast that I discovered by the CEO, Paul Reitzer, and the Chief Content Officer, Mike Kaput, that I discovered shortly after ChatGPT emerged, and been really listening to them richly for the last year and a half. They really kind of have a level set of what AI is and how it's going to, and they've actually changed their podcast name from Marketing AI to just the AI podcast about AI literacy. And I would say that's one of the things I really want to focus on now, is like, how do we have AI literacy working inside our world? So the conference really focuses on piloting AI, scaling AI, a lot of contents in there, other use cases. They had about 30 vendors, I want to say, that were there. They had 1,100 attendees, which was great, filled in a really good space. It didn't feel like you were at a small conferences, but it certainly wasn't as big as something like an Adobe Summit or even like a Dreamforce or an Inbound conference as well. It definitely kind of made it feel like you had space to talk, space to learn, space to understand, ask questions, interact with the community, all those fun things, which was exactly what you want to get out of a conference in and of itself. So so I think, from at the end of the day, it was a really good event. Here's the event itself. It's going to be back in Cleveland next year in October. But they had some great speakers everywhere from companies like Alibaba, to the AI Institute. I'll talk about Drew Davis's session here in a second because he had a great session around some digital twins. You had people from the legal profession. We'll talk about the ethics and copyright session that they did. A futurist with Mike Walsh. Just some great content all across the board. Really, again, if you're thinking about going to an AI conference, there's a ton you probably can go to, but I would definitely encourage to think about MAICON as a place to go next year. From the actual content, Paul kicks off the event and talks about his big first keynote session was about the road to AGI. And if you're not familiar with what AGI is, AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence. And that is the really interesting acronym and a set of words together, but it's really what OpenAI, all the big research labs, including what you say, Google and Meta and others that are, from a big company perspective are striving for when we're talking about this next generation of AI content. So AGI does not have a singular definition. You can go on almost everyone's website and see a different one, but essentially AGI is achieved when AI can outperform humans at a basic intelligence set of functions better than a human. And that could be from, accomplishing tasks to doing agent level stuff to working on someone's behalf. But as an average person, which we're not talking about a PhD, we're not talking about the smartest people in the room, but we're talking about the average person. And so we are getting there in many ways. I'm going to talk to kind of like the 5 levels of AGI or AI in general here in a minute. But Paul laid out kind of a roadmap, and the roadmap really comes down to AI has been in the world for 70 years. Like we've been having AI for forever, but when OpenAI opened up ChatGPT to the world in this generative AI, this new interaction model where you can use a chatbot interface to interact with technology, really kind of changed the game. It made it more consumer ready. And so that is now, we've seen this mad rush, right? The hype cycles going on from Gartner's perspective, or are we at the peak? Are we heading into the trough of disillusionment? Are we really going to come out? What does that really look like? But it is the next kind of 4 to 5, 6 years is a horizon level of different levels of maturity that we're going to go through when it comes to AGI and getting to AGI and the road to that space. And while I'm not going to sit here and take all of Paul's, keynote session, I'm going to kind of outline the next 4 or 5 years, just in, verbally. I'm not going to show any slides that he did, but it is an unofficial timeline, and it is going to be somewhat level of, it's going to change. I would think probably when Paul wrote it, and then what we actually heard in announcements and now have seen in the last week and a half, this timeline might change a little bit. But essentially, in 2024, we're seeing all the major large language models, LLMs, have major advancements. There's ChatGPT 4 that we've had. Anthropic's been coming out with their new models. Cohere's been coming out with their new models. Amazon continues to come out with models. Google comes out with models. Everyone's going to continue their traditional models we've seen to date. They're going to continue to advance them, and OpenAI is going to continue to do the same. We've seen those models evolve. Right now, it's really text generating with some image, audio, video that's coming into place. And that's where the multimodal AI explosion is going to start to take place, which is really going to be 25 through 26. I'm not sure if you've messed with any of the things like Suno for audio generation, or just even DALL-E, Midjourney, some of the stuff from image generation. You got Stable Diffusion, which can give you video generation. These are the things that we're messing around with, but we're going to start to see scalability start to occur over the next 2 years, and that's going to start to come into play. I have a really interesting example of a session I attended about how the first AI ad was created for Under Armour. I'm going to kind of talk about that here in a little bit, but you can see it kind of come to life. Like, it's not just messing around anymore. There's actual applications that are coming into play that is going to change the way we work and change the way we actually, interact and do stuff. So it's exciting to kind of see from that perspective. So, 24 level 1, first kind of like horizon point. The next horizon, I talk about multimodal AI explosion. The other big thing that came out this week, and you're hearing more and more about it, are things like AI agents. And so we're seeing, Paul predicts that from 25 and 27, those next 2 years starting next year, and we're seeing it kind of start to emerge now, and we knew that was going to probably be the case, is this idea of what an agent is. Someone acting on the behalf of somebody else, doing a very specific task, repeating literally clicks on keyboards to execute something, and then how to then deliver on that to get to an outcome. Salesforce just really announced their agent whole rebranding of Dreamforce to Agentforce, and their whole new approach to how they're going to take AI and embed it into everything that Salesforce does. And agents is a big foundation of that. I think their agents are probably still more programmatic than maybe more evolutionary from the sense of reasoning and decision tree making, but we'll see. It's brand new. People are really coming off hyped and excited about that. As well as we had Inbound this week. I think that ends today. And they're talking about agents because HubSpot is another big player in that space. And their co-founders started their own, website, agent.ai, that's got a whole bunch of agents. He's clearly seeing agents as the next evolution of where we're going to go. And so agents is going to be the thing. In fact, Paul predicted on stage that we may see in the next year the single person company that is making $1 billion in revenue because they have agents talking to agents and creating a whole entire agent workforce to work on behalf of what the company vision is. That may be real. It might not be impossible to pull off. Is it $1 billion in revenue? Is it $1 million in revenue? I don't know what that looks like, but it's getting interesting that it can be the case. And I know there's a lot of examples that are out there that people can start to flirt around with. I have not personally dug into that part yet. I'm still kind of skeptical on the agent land, but it's certainly here. It's coming very, very soon. As we look at the next echelon, kind of the road to AGI 26 through 2030, robotics. You're starting to see Tesla has a robot. You have the whole thing from can't think of the lab now. Hyundai bought them, but the robots we've seen. How do you take a physical robot that can do physical work and embed AI like OpenAI and ChatGPT into it with vision models and audio models and other things that it can actually have human interaction and now put it into a robotic state? Maybe not even just a humanoid robot state, but Boston Dynamics is the company. Like, how do they take their bots and now infuse them with AI to do more and be more useful in that particular case? Are we looking at a whole new industrial revolution? Are we looking at a whole nother set of like new ways that we can deploy workforces that we couldn't before in a safe manner? Very interesting, perspective and what we can actually look at from that next evolution. And then Paul's prediction is that 2028 through 2030, we're really going to see the emergence of true AGI, where the solutions and the software is getting to the point where it is exceeding a lot of human level tasks and ability to do stuff. That opens up a whole other set of questions we're not going to get into today, but it does kind of give a timeline of what we're looking at from what does the next 5 years look like. Now, in that time frame, we saw OpenAI launched their new model out, which has got a bunch of reasoning features and functionality behind it. I will again show a demonstration a little bit, but it kind of almost changed the game. And that was on the last day, 2 hours before the last keynote. Paul and Mike had to pull an audible. It was a really good session. I actually posted on my LinkedIn their version, that 10-minute hot take, 15-minute hot take Paul had. I really encourage everyone to go look at that. Find it. I'll reshare it as well. But it's really interesting to hear Paul's take on, and then the scariness that comes with it too. But the hot take on where does the version of reasoning and what does it do from a self-learning perspective? Really cool and interesting conversation that at least perspective that he brought to the table. So, we're in this really interesting space, right? The next 3 to 5 years is going to get interesting. And I would say in the next 2 years is going to get really interesting. And companies are betting big on it. I mean, Salesforce is doing a big bet on this. I would be willing to bet that HubSpot's making a big bet on where agents going to go. And a lot of companies are going to start paying attention and really understanding how it's going to impact them, not only from the big technology vendors, but I think even companies like professional services organizations and consultancies and anyone that's doing stuff that is actually like a human work product. It is, how do you get to take advantage of these tools, but not be necessarily replaced by them? And I think one of the themes that Paul ended with in his keynote was this idea of being human first. AI is going to continue to be a thing, right? The Pandora's box open, it's not going back, but how do you make sure that you are maintaining a human first approach and make you yourself still the protagonist of the story, and your AI agents and your other tools are your support staff? They're your Robins to your Batmans. They are the other one that's going to help you accomplish what you need to get done. Which really led into the next set of keynote from the first session, which is by the game of Drew Davis. I actually know Drew. Drew spoke at a conference that we hosted a couple years ago. It was really great to see him. When he spoke at our conference, he was talking about loyalties and loyalty loops. This time he was talking about AI agents and how we will have these digital doppelgangers out there representing us, which has got a whole other set of implications. But he did spent a whole session talking about what he has created as his Drew Dini, which is his digital twin. And his digital twin was really kind of focused on helping him accomplish specific tasks from, in his use case, it was really about how does he create another person looks like him, he's got his voice cloned, and can he write and execute more promo videos for the places he's going to be a keynote speaker at? How does he use it to help craft presentations faster? And he basically is what he's essentially has done is he's created custom GPTs with OpenAI's GPT models and trained it on very specific things that he wants to accomplish. So he walked through about 5 or 6 different custom GPTs that he has created to help him accomplish his tasks faster, more reliably, and in a context and a level of fidelity that he was comfortable sharing out in the world. I do think it's like the next generation, right? What do we think about AI and generative AI supporting us? And it is going to be this idea of custom GPTs. OpenAI is not the only one that has them. Anthropic has theirs as well. And Claude, or is it Cohere? Claude has their agents in there as well. They're going to start to see this ability to kind of create these little mini tools to help you accomplish certain things. But Drew spent a whole session on that. And it starts to introduce this idea of what does the future of work look like? Are you selling yourself to future employers? Or are you selling yourself and your tools in your toolkit to help you deliver on a job function and a job set of tasks? Drew's just energetic in general. He does a great storyteller. If you haven't seen Drew in a live session, I highly recommend you go off and do it if you can. And hopefully he's speaking at a conference near you. So that was really kicking off the conference. I'm not going to go through everything, but I just want to kind of set the stage because it really did, bring 2 different perspectives. Like, what's the future look like? And then here's this next generation thing with these like digital doppelgangers that people have been hearing about. So let's talk about some key themes. The doppelganger is one of them. Drew wasn't the only one that talked about having a digital twin. There was a great session as well around how, like, can you create, another version of me? And I've worked with a platform called HeyGen, trying to create and find the right use case for using text creation to then mimic me in a setting where I can create content faster and more efficiently. There's a discussion that was also brought up on how the Zoom CEO over the last year has basically said you can send a digital twin to a webinar or web conference and act on your behalf. And even HeyGen's talking about how they can, create avatars where you can give it instructions to act on your behalf. I think that future is probably coming faster than we think about it. And we're not just talking about deep fakes and a bunch of other stuff, but like literally like programmatic interactive avatars that look very human, or cartoonish, or however you kind of want to set it up. But that was one of the themes that came out of it. I think ultimately, though, this theme of the whole entire conference is really going from piloting AI to scaling AI. And that is an interesting theme to work through, right? Again, AI is here. Generative AI is here. Almost everyone is probably working in a sense where your tools are currently creating AI functionality. Everyone's baking it in there. It's the greatest marketing thing du jour, but there are some functionalities coming into place. So how are you finding your use cases? How are you finding your challenge statements, your problem statements, and then finding if AI can actually execute and help you accomplish it more? And those are really the key focus of the tracks. So the track for scaling AI was kind of how you can scale in your organization. How are you thinking about policies at your company? How are you thinking about how you can deploy it safely inside your company? Taking advantage of the tools that your platforms are already providing. And then the other one was really about content and how do you look at content in a more effective and efficient way. And they had some great sessions on SEO and content creation, but it does come down to, content creation being the sense of that's the easy use case, right? That's what OpenAI puts out today. That's what all these new GPT bots are putting out, is this idea of content from image, audio, text, and other things. And so how do you effectively build it? Robert Rose has been at the Content Marketing Institute for a number of years and has a lot of things been known inside the content space. It's really focusing on how content creation, your generative AI strategy is not your content creation strategy, and how you spent a whole entire session on really how do you still be human first in your content creation, but using generative AI at certain points to make it better. I'd be willing to bet every one of you who have experimented with generative AI in some way, shape, or form have really just messed around with this idea of simple question, simple prompt, simple answer, and you're like, I don't know if that really delivered anything really good. And then they might have a simple, good enough prompt where it's delivering way better. Like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's going to go through this ebbs and flows. And Drew talked about this, and so did Robert, where it's really like, where does the content value really come in? Is it the brainstorming function? Is it the idea of stubbing out an outline? Is it the idea of storyboarding? And how do you kind of deliver on that in a more meaningful way? And, the point of it is generative AI content at its root, even if you have the most complex prompts, still creates, in many cases, meh kind of content. It really still is a human first. You really need to be human. The human part has to be in there. I think generative AI being editing, prompting an idea for additional input or context. Would it meet a certain audience? Can you pressure test it against personas? I think those are where things like generative AI really comes into play. But I do think the content story that came out of this was really use it as a tool, use it as a way to accelerate your content creation, maybe reduce your timelines to execute your content, but it should not be the bulk of your content. And what really resonated and put a rubber stamp on that was the legal discussion that they had as far as the noon keynote, which is, the copyright law is pretty clear in the sense that copyrighted material has to be human created. And the lawyers that are on stage and those that were in the legal profession were talking about it, was really focusing on the sense that, you could use it for brainstorming, you use it for editing, but if you are just delivering it flat out, copy, paste, execute, it's not going to be copyrightable. And so if you think about agencies and content creators, what is safe to use generative AI for and what's not? As a marketer, I would say marketing content, I don't care if you copy my marketing content, I'm not sure I'm going to care at the end of the day. It's not copyrightable in my particular, perspective. So yes, use generative AI to help you draft social media, draft outlines, maybe draft a blog post. The blog post gets a little tricky. I think you want to keep that more in your human kind of sense, but like, where do you use your execution from your advertising perspective where it isn't something you want copyrighted? It doesn't need to be copyrighted at the end of the day, but ChatGPT and all the LLMs love their adjectives. You can definitely tell when stuff is written by a generative AI scenario. So you really have to kind of understand, like, does it test well? Does it perform better? How do you want to execute on that? But again, copywriting and the copyright laws, as it continues to evolve, it has to be like really focused on human creation, which gets really interesting when it comes to things like audio and video and images, because you aren't creating, but as a person who wants to be creative, but doesn't have that artistic touch, like, it is a great tool to open up the idea of the world to giving me more creativity at the end of the day. But you can't copyright a generative AI image. In fact, I saw that Google announced they're trying to find ways to actually flag copyrighted images in search results now, so what's been generated by AI versus what's not. It's gonna be really interesting to see how this continues to evolve. But what I do want to kind of take a moment here to talk about is really like what has been done with generative AI and creativity. So let's talk about like what our good friends over at the Tool company has done when it comes to their ad. So I'm kind of accelerating this in my sharing screen here. This is the behind the scenes, but this company called Tool really kind of put together, like, they were doing an ad for an Under Armour. The title is called "Forever is Made Now." You can see it on YouTube. I'm not going to play it. But this is the first majority AI generated ad. The fighter in this particular case was preparing for his fight. He was not going to give any time to the agency and to kind of put together this. There's like, we got to keep him focused on this whole experience. So the boxer was Francis Ngannou. But how do you actually make this available? So this page, and I'll link to it in the notes and in the comments here, but it's like, how do you go and use generative AI? So they use generative AI to actually create the concept. Great use of AI, right? But they still had people like creative director, writers, directors, creative leads. Like it was, the point of his whole session was, you still need a lot of the same people to do a regular ad, but using generative AI in a way that helps them conceptualize and do it faster and more creatively. From a production perspective, they were using visual arts and AI design, but they had to still infuse the traditional stuff, but they used generative AI to create other elements as part of the ad in and of itself, down to even like the 3D modeling and storyboarding. Like, they used it all to help them execute. And what they got at the end of the day was this amazing kind of like just, journey around stuff and where they kind of got to the net result, including to the point where they actually wanted to actually clone his voice. So they sent him an ad, but they'd already cloned and gotten permission to clone his voice using 11 Labs to then with the script. And they gave the boxer the opportunity to just re-record the voiceover. And he's like, no, like this works. This is great. Not only did you save me time and energy to kind of focus on what I needed to focus on, you didn't distract me, but I could take the few minutes to look at this ad and like it's spot on and delivered. And it made a lot of noise in the industry. And it definitely did things that are, could be the future of creating advertisements and creativity in a more unique way. It shrunk a timeline down to about a month, which he said was really beneficial, and it opened up new opportunities for them. But it was still a very human injected process. It wasn't like just give it over to OpenAI or to generative AI tools, but it was like we're going to use them in a more positive way. And again, guidelines, like they are using it in their own sandbox, so they're not training the models. They're using a lot of Under Armour's proprietary information and content. So they had to find ways to do it in a safe way. But when they figured that out, they were able to deliver a much better experience on that. So it's a really cool experience, and kind of just seeing how they did it. This entire session was about marketing, content pipeline. This whole page is on their site, so it kind of shows how it was made. But it was a pretty cool experience to kind of listen how that is beyond the typical just text generation, content creation component from an event perspective. Now, again, multiple tracks. I'm not going to get into some of the other sessions that they're, talk about segmentation, copy, content, SEO, lots of great kind of stuff. There's too much to go that I couldn't go to everything. So I had to kind of pick and choose where I went. But, while you're there, you also start to get like other news that are happening. So there was definitely other AI news happening at MAICON in real time. First one I saw was, Adobe Firefly. So Adobe announced that they had kind of reached a new level of their ability to deliver on content. And so they kind of started to preview the Firefly video model. So this was some information that came out. It's coming soon, but I'm on the wait list to kind of see it. But it is about how they're going to bring video to life and using the prompt to deliver on their library. Again, stressing commercial ready for them, unlike some of the other tools that are trained on copyrighted material. This is using their stock set of stuff. They're one of the first that really can claim this, although there's been some kind of some backlash for some of their models is trained on open stuff. But it was really cool, to see that announcement from one of the big creative leaders that's out there. We saw Google did a general release for their notebook LM, which is really focused on education, but just this amazing kind of way. And it's been available, but they added this new like voice podcasty type of feature that came with it. But the point of it is to, add content in, and within a snap, start to create things like study guides and summaries and, briefing decks and all this FAQs. I started actually taking all my transcripts and notes that I took from MAICON and pumping it into a notebook to see how it actually generated could it give me a 5-minute synopsis of what MAICON was in a podcast, which their podcast, features 2 very realistic voices in a back and forth podcast model. The same voices, everyone gets it. So it's not something you're going to take and all of a sudden make production ready, but it was a very interesting way to kind of digest. I like to listen to content. So it was an interesting way to kind of produce learning. Really can't wait to introduce this to my kids and say like, hey, here's a new way you can start to study. Grab all your notes, get them from your teachers, upload them. Here's a new interactive way you can actually like take content and do something with it. And then HeyGen announced that their 3.0 model for their digital avatars came out. And so I've been looking to mess around with this. I pay for this subscription to kind of see where I can go with adding a digital twin to just content creation in general, because I think this is going to be a thing. So they announced their new model. They've done some really cool things. Their labs functionality has got some really cool interactive avatars in real time. That I think is going to again see the avatar continue to think avatar with agent, with text, reasoning. Like there's some interesting dynamics you can see in the future when it comes to generative AI and this type of stuff. And then lastly, as I was in line to get to talk to Paul one more time and take a picture with him, Strawberry hit, which we had heard that, through a information report that was gonna be coming in the next 2 weeks. And then there was another report that kind of came out. It was going to drop potentially this week or last week in that case. And then it actually happened that day. And so, we all kind of got to hear Paul's hot take, and then I had to leave for the airport. But at the airport, I actually found out I'm a paying subscriber, so I actually had access to it as well. So what I did while I was sitting at the airport is I went through and I'm like, all right, let's test this out. Let's see what this reasoning thing is kind of all about and what's different. So knowing that the new model is focused on things like math and PhD level stuff and some more complicated reasoning of things, trying to figure out, I think Paul used the example of like quantum mechanics, and I didn't want to go down that road. But I my wife's a math teacher. I'm like, Pythagorean theorem. So I use this, like, explain the Pythagorean theorem to me, which has some level of logic. Well, lo and behold, the dumb guy in me did something really silly by like spelling it wrong. So I want to show you what it actually like did as an example of the O1 preview versus ChatGPT 4. And so what I did was I focused in on, let's blow this up. I said, all right, explain the Pythagorean theorem for me. Now, if you're anyone like me, you noticed Pythagorean theorem is spelled incorrectly. So interestingly enough, when it goes through, it says thinking, and then it dumps out all the content. And so, the first thing it said was like, okay, correcting the spelling. Let me see. I'm going to ensure that you identified that you really want to say Pythagorean theorem. So then it went through and did the process, the steps that it took to actually then dump out this answer, giving me equations, explaining what it means, giving me examples. So the hypotenuse of 5 in units and this, code kind of diagram. I didn't even think that much of it. It didn't even took me until I went to the next step, which is I took the same prompt and put it in ChatGPT 4.0. And it's like, oh, you misspelled it. I think you want to do this, but I don't know if this is what you really want me to do. So I'm not going to do anything else. You need to actually do another prompt to figure it out. So stopped in this place. So my interesting thing was like, the reasoning was, I see what you're trying to do. One could say simple if then logic kind of figured that out. And is it really reasoning? I don't know, but it's certainly then, but it gave me an answer. Like it actually figured out what I was trying to do and then did it in the preview model versus the real model. And it said, nope, we're going to stop in our tracks. We're not going to do it. I think it is other things you have to figure out that you want to do to understand how you're going to be able to take advantage of this. I don't think, and Paul thinks this way, and I think a lot of us as well, is that there's going to be use cases for regular ChatGPT because they're going to still continue to follow this line of models. And then when does the reasoning and the other elements come into play when you need more thoughtful aspects where there's different types of brainstorming, different types of complex, decision making, when you would use these models differently. And I do think they're going to be bifurcated. I think right now preview is free. There's rumors that it'd be $2,000 a month if you want to have access to it because it is a very different model. So it'll be really interesting to see what the pricing model comes out to, but we've seen now a new dynamic. There is a different space that's happening with these models, and it'll be really interesting to see if Cohere and Anthropic and others can catch up to the space and deliver on competing models for us to kind of play with. Getting a little long in the tooth on this, so I just want to kind of talk about just wrapping up, hey, the one thing about this whole set of being at the conference is that you are now embedded in a community of like-minded individuals. And like with any conference you go to, whether it be for a platform or for a topic, you're with like-minded individuals. And, while I didn't necessarily learn a ton, it was validating to be in a space where you were hearing the same stories from peers and hearing the same stories from others that you might be in the same space. And, whether we're on the frontier of this, because we're really paying attention to the frontier models and where this all comes to play, I don't know, if we're, special in a different bubble. I definitely think I'm in a bubble. I think I've curated all my kind of content creation and consumption to be in the space of generative AI. But do you feel that we are, in this space, you felt safe to ask questions, you felt safe to explore ideas, you felt safe to really learn and explore what the art of the possible is. And that was awesome to be around. The marketing AI community is, what they've established is great. They got a Slack group of over 7,000 individuals that's very active every week. But it was cool to be in that space with that. Met some really great people. I stayed away from the vendors at the end of the day because I didn't want to be on any future mailing lists, but it was cool to see what people are putting out there, and what availability. Now I didn't see any of the big players there, but certainly you saw some ones that were in the space like Writer and Jasper and some other ones, SalesLoft and 6 Sense and some other tools were there as well. So the community is awesome. And again, if you aren't part of that community, check them out. I think it's worth being part of the space that's really thinking about what the future of our work and as marketers is going to look like. The AI Institute has put out a couple of new custom GPTs on what jobs would look like in a couple of years. Type in a job, it gives you an output. What a campaign can have generative AI, look at. They've got some other new tools they're putting together using ChatGPT, custom GPTs to pull it off. But it was really kind of awesome community, highly recommend. And then last thing I'll leave with is so where are we in our evolution of generative AI? It's still day 3. I think at last, if you would ask me a couple months ago, I'd say we're in day 2. I think we're still advancing as this continues to evolve. And I think, Is it too late? It is too late if you're not thinking about it, but it's not too late in some cases, but it's too late if you're not actually trying to experiment. I think Forrester and Gardner all predicted 2024 would be the year we moving out of experimentation into actual applications. And I think you're starting to see some of that. A lot of the big software companies are bringing the generative AI more into their applications. I would say the Agentforce stuff that Salesforce has put together is an evolution of their Einstein GPT. So they are now on kind of almost rev 2 of their, what is going to be this new agent land for them, this new direction for how they want to create software and have interactivity with it. Can I talk to my data? Can I talk to campaigns? Can I get insights? But if you're not thinking about this, if your company is not talking about AI policies, if they're not exploring what's the art of the possible is, they're not finding out where the safe places to do stuff is, you are going to be behind, because it won't necessarily be that your competition is going to outpace you, but you're going to have a hard time catching up at the end of the day. So I would say, if you are not personally looking into this stuff, you should start reading up on it. You should be following people like Paul and Mark, Mike Kaput from the AI Institute. You should be following people like Ethan Mollick, Ali K. Miller. There's a number of other people you should be following, just to kind of get yourself immersed in what's going on. But in some cases, you're not behind the ball, because there's a lot of companies that are going to sit and wait and see where their competition goes. Are we going to not, come out of this trough of disillusionment that Gartner says we're entering? But I do think whatever we come out to, it's not just going to be about Gen AI. I think Gen AI is the hot term that is pulling all of AI together. And the next few years is going to be, as Paul kind of outlined, this evolution of content and work product and workforce management and robotics and all these other kind of things as we look at what the future of our world is going to be. But I will leave with this as being, we still want to be rooted in human first. It is super important for us to think about, this is a tool set that is not necessarily I don't think we should be thinking about as replacing humans, but it should be taking a lot of our tasks and ability to become smarter, more efficient, more effective, so we can do bigger, better things and focus on the things that matter, that humans need to do, with emotion, with empathy, with humility, with humanity. Those are the things that matter the most, in my opinion. And the AI, the generative AI component of this, is what is going to deliver more value to us at the end of the day. So overall, I would call it an 8 out of 10 from a conference perspective. I definitely am interested in going back next year, continue to see what's going to happen. I mean, if we saw anything that just with OpenAI's announcement, the next 6 to 12 months is going to be super interesting. I got a lot more thoughts I'm going to continue to kind of put together content on around this world of AI, generative AI, this intersection of marketing, growth, and technology. That's my interest level. I'm going to try and continue to deliver that type of content to you guys. But thank you for joining me on a Friday with Fred. And until next time, experiment. Go get some subscriptions. Go check out stuff. Find your use cases. Drop down your challenge statements. What are the things you want to explore on? Don't sit and wait. Your AI literacy is dependent on you, and you have to take the bull by the horns and grab for it. So move on, continue to prosper, and look at generative AI as how it can deliver value to you, personal, professional, and all things in between. All right, until next time, I'll catch you later. I'm Fred.